Washington State is number one in losing 11,300 construction jobs over the last year. Let's read from Jason Rant, Seattle Red. Thanks to failed Democratic leadership, Washington lost 11,300 construction jobs. Oh, right. Oh, that is great news. No, not the direction we want to go. What's behind this? A lot of the policies I talk about, Jason talks about, all the other conservatives talk about here in Washington State. You're seeing the end result of constricting the ability for developers to make it here, and they're pulling back on top of an economy that's like, what direction are we heading? We've had some high inflation. Which way is this bad boy going to go? You have that on top of a bunch of knuckleheads who virtue signal day in, day out. And here we are. Let's get into it. Here we go. Failed Democratic leadership. It's so true. And, you know, if you look at underneath here, Washington State is losing construction jobs thanks to truly bad policies. Now, the one policy that as a residential guy, we're talking construction jobs in general. And on the residential side of things, one of the policies that will absolutely come and spank Washington State is the ridiculous controlled rent, because it basically states, hey, we do not support development here. Don't come build here. Don't come build here, because we're putting all this regulation on our state and we need you to comply. And that is just the absolute most recent cream of the crop type ridiculousness that we're seeing, on top of years and layers and years of layers of just nonsense that's supposed to protect the consumer, but in reality constricts the supply of housing, drives the cost of housing through the roof. And now you've got an entry-level market that does not exist. When $750,000 is the cheapest home in your neighborhood, and that's for a lot of what I, sit around here, it's a total piece of crap. $750,000, that doesn't make any sense. No sense at all. And it's because you've constricted the supply and there's enough folks that can afford it. And we're talking $1 million being median in a lot of our market, meaning half of the homes are less, half of the homes are more. Who can afford that? What kid coming out of college, working for a handful of years, can come up with $200,000 on $1 million home and then pay $800,000 balance debt with a mortgage at 6.5%, 7%? No can do, Kimosabi, even with two of them. It's very difficult. Washington just earned the unfortunate distinction of leading the nation in construction job losses, and it's no mystery why. And we're going to see just more and more and more of this because of stupid policy that should have never been put in place, but because of virtue signaling politicians. This is what we get. It's going to be the greatest thing ever. We're going to protect our middle class. Oh, and the middle class is leaving because they can't afford anything. The state shed a staggering 11,300 construction jobs from June 2024 to June 2025 in 1 year, more than any other state, according to the Associated General Contractors of America. I think one of the reasons we haven't necessarily felt it is because we had so much construction going on that you shed 11,300 jobs and you're like, just flicking it off, right? Just, it's not a big deal. Not a big deal. But when you see the numbers of, the number of homes being constructed, how about multifamily construction? How about multifamily construction in Portland, Oregon? You've restricted that so badly. There's nobody wants to build it. There's no incentive to build it. You've literally in Portland, same thing in Seattle. In Portland, you've got the mayor and you've got the governor going out and glad-handing developers saying, hey, come and build we're going to give you a couple of incentives. It ain't going to work because you've made it known, just like you've made it known that you don't want cops in your cities. You've made it known, hey, we support defund the police. We don't want cops in our neighborhood. And then what happens? Nobody wants to be a cop, and you've got not enough cops, and then public safety gets worse and worse and worse. And, you're stuck with it. You're stuck with the end result of terrible policy. So what's behind the plunge? It's not just bad luck. No, it's not, but bad policy. Developers are pulling back because the climate in Washington, especially under Democrat leadership, is hostile to growth. Who's our most famous resident that just moved to Florida? Jeff Bezos sold his $63 million home on Hunts Point and said, see you guys, going to Florida. Why was that? Because Florida is a better place for him to be. Washington State, hey, let's tax the F out of everybody because we have so many ridiculously bloated policies and programs we got to pay for. Who's going to pay it? $9.2 billion in new taxes in Washington State. Somebody's going to pay that, right? Somebody's going to pay that. All that taxation, it's got to be paid. So as taxes go up, people make less money, can afford less. And at the same time, you've constricted that supply of housing. So especially under Democratic leadership is hostile to growth. Red tape, punitive permitting delays, costly labor mandates. Oh, yeah. Out the backside and endless environmental roadblocks. We love to hug trees here. And then we wonder, why don't we have enough housing? Well, get out that chainsaw, boys. Have all but strangled new development. Pair that with banks tightening lending. Absolutely. They don't know what's coming. They're going to pull back. In times of growth, you betcha. Put that money out there, cycle that money, get that money going, because that's how it works. Spurred by inflationary and anti-growth economic policies, and you've got a recipe for collapse. You're on the front end of, I think, Washington State, seeing a fairly good-sized slowdown, at least construction-wise, because things have gotten so expensive, most people can't afford a home. And that is what drives so much of this. Most people, can afford an apartment, but you don't have enough of those being built either, because who in the world is going to look at Washington State and go, you know what? I'm going to bet on Washington State because they seem to be really pro-development. I want to have millions and millions of dollars of equity investors tied up in a state that is pro-growth, that is pro-real estate, and that is not Washington. So they go to Florida, they go to Texas, they go to Oklahoma, they go to the states where they can churn and burn and get that stuff up, get that money working. And politicians here in Washington State just basically have their head up their ass. And every now and then they pull it out, look around and go, where's all the housing? Oh, what happened to the housing? Why is it so expensive? And then complain that you got too many whacked out drug addicts on the streets because our housing is so expensive. Huh. How'd that work? You know what I mean? It's like, get a clue, guys. Figure it out. Look at what the Republican states are doing. What are they doing that you should be doing? Yeah, a lot. This isn't that hard to figure out. Actions have consequences. And progressive policies explain the job losses. A third of the job losses were concentrated in the Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue region. Now, that's where the most development's going. That's where the most population is, right? Between Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue, where progressive policies have already driven up office vacancies to nearly 30%, thanks to the permanent push for remote work. That has crushed the downtown cores. Now, what I would say there, downtown Bellevue, I think has 17% office vacancy, but we are building like there is no tomorrow. Our skyline is massive. Bellevue skyline is impressive now. You're like, what in the heck happened there? When I was a kid, there wasn't one. You had the Packard building. Yeah, I don't know if that's a dozen stories, 20 stories, but that was it. You had nothing. Now it's just a huge powerhouse. They've got about a 17% vacancy rate. But downtown Seattle, yeah, you've had that push for remote work on top of you've got street conditions where nobody wants to have their office in downtown Seattle because their employees might get killed. So there's that, street conditions. So you got multi kind of faceted stuff going on. Downtown cores are ghost towns. They are. And, let's be honest. Let's be reasonable, because this is news for reasonable, not news for dingbats. This is not unique just to the Puget Sound market, Seattle, Portland. A lot of downtown cores suffered from the work from home, but a lot of the cities that suffered, they are working on bringing back. They're making mandates. They're doing that. And if they have street conditions that are pretty safe, then it's going to work. If you've got street conditions in areas of downtown like Seattle and Portland do, no. And Portland's probably got the highest vacancy rate in the United States. San Francisco is starting to backfill heavy with AI. And we've seen that starting to come. It's just, that's how that cycle goes. You've got more tech in San Francisco than you do in Portland and in Seattle. Office values are cratering. How many podcasts have I done of office buildings just absolutely tanking? 80, 90, 95% reduction in values. Portland's big pink. A couple of other office towers in Portland that sold for $6 million. I mean, just incredible office, opportunity for somebody who's willing to put their nuts on the line and go out and buy it. And, let's do a 10-year hold. Office values are cratering, and no serious policy from Democrats has addressed it. You know what? Because they can't. They just have to keep kind of going down this road, this path, and then, just commiserate amongst themselves. Why isn't this working out? And it's because the constituents keep voting blue, and they keep putting knuckleheads into positions that don't have any business making decisions on how the state should go from an economic standpoint. They just care about people and programs, homeless industrial complex, and a bunch of nonsense that just absolutely bloats the budget. And then you end up with this, $9.2 billion in taxes. Unless you count endless tax hikes and crime-enabling legislation. You're going to have to drop the hammer on crime. You're going to have to drop the hammer on the drug use. You're going to have to drop the hammer on lunatics running around on our roadways, running around our downtowns. You're going to have to drop the hammer on that. And I mean by that, involuntarily put them into treatment or into a mental institution or incarcerate them. And this is Washington State. We're not doing any of that. Instead, we're just going to keep raising taxes because, hey, if we just had more housing, if we just spent another few $1 billion, we would have gotten there with our existing policy and it would have worked. No. Look at what the Republican states are doing. What are they doing? Blow and go. Build. The ability to build. How are they doing that? A lot of times it's a geographic constraint issue. Texas has got tons of land. Oklahoma's got tons of land. Florida has land. Washington State, you're stuck in between Puget Sound, the ocean, and a mountain range called the Cascades. Same thing with Portland. And on top of that, you have layered all this Democrat tree-hugging policy. And that's how you end up with a massive shortage and your cost of your housing just goes through the roof. Meanwhile, as construction jobs vanish, home prices continue to skyrocket. Median price of a home in the Seattle metro area just hit $750, one of the highest in the nation, pricing out working families, pricing out just about all families except dual income that makes, good money. Everybody else is living in an apartment. That's what happens when Democrats make it nearly impossible to build, then act shocked when supply can't meet demand. Oh, we just don't have enough affordable housing. How often do you hear that out of Democrats in big blue, cities, counties, states? How often do you hear that? If we just had more affordable housing, then I hear so many people blaming our drug issues on lack of affordable housing. It's the United States of America. You've got other countries that are literally third world countries that are shockingly poor. and their constituents don't do, they're not out shooting the fetty. They're not smoking fetty. They're not all just giving up and living off the government. They're not doing that, mainly because they can't, because the government can't support them, because there isn't a tax base to make that happen. But in big blue liberal cities, you've got that all day long. All day long. One of my earlier podcasts today was Portland just completely bent the knee and signed an executive order in response to President Trump's DEI rules, meaning Portland needs that money. Like $400 million a year comes in from the federal government into Portland. They need that money so badly. They are so thin with their numbers, with their budget, that Trump basically said, hey, if you can't self-certify that you guys aren't violating federal policy with your DEI hires, if you can't change that up and basically tell us that you are able to function without violating civil rights by implementing these racist DEI policies, because let's admit it, the DEI policies are based on what race you are, aren't they? Oh, you get hired. Oh, you? Oof, no. So that's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of pans itself out. This is the consequence of progressive urban planning. 100%. Job losses, unaffordable housing, and a shrinking middle class. Absolutely. Without question. Hands down. Don't expect them to reverse course. They're too busy pushing climate virtue signals while the state's economy crumbles. 100%. They are fighting. Look at Seattle. Seattle to sue Trump administration over threat to federal funding. That's not going to work out well. I don't know if you know this about our current president. He loves a good lawsuit. He will throw down with a lawsuit with anybody. You know what that is? That's how business at the higher levels. That's how business at the higher levels goes. All right, we're going to need this from you with this contract. Yeah, we're not going to do that. All right. We'll see you in court. All right. Good luck. And that's how that get handled. Trump doesn't care. He doesn't care. He's like, bring it on. Let's see how this goes. Whereas, so Seattle's doing that. Meanwhile, Portland is just absolutely bending over and taking it because they need the money so bad. I mean, it's not that hard to figure out, right? Washington saw biggest construction job loss in the U.S. over the past year. There's no question that developers have pulled back. AGC chief economist Ken Simonson told the Puget Sound Business Journal, or the banks have pulled in the lending chain on them. It's a combination of both. But when you have policies like rent cap, who wants to deal with a market where it's based on rent cap, where you can go to another state, because these are typically big national scaled builders? Why would you build in Washington state? Why would you build here? Why would you take on the additional risk of building in a state that is so anti-development? Why you wouldn't? And that's what's going on. And the banks, accordingly, have pulled back from a lot of development. They've pulled back from a lot of lending because they're like, well, with inflation raging, we're not sure which way things are going to go. We're not going to stick our necks out. We're going to do conservative lending in Washington state. That ain't one of those places. This isn't one of those places. It's not the go-go times anymore. Third of the job losses were concentrated in the Seattle Bellevue. This is interesting right here. Let me get out my yellow pointer. The largest construction projects in the area between Seattle, Tacoma, and Bellevue are the Microsoft campus renovation. That is literally this direction about 2 miles, maybe a mile and a half. They took an office, the Microsoft main campus, one Microsoft way, leveled the whole MFer. I mean, these were buildings from the 1980s. They leveled them and they're redoing it. So that is literally 2 miles that way. The East Link extension, they've got a light rail. It goes literally a few blocks from my office right here, maybe 4 blocks from my office. That And the Spring District in Bellevue, which is at 124th and Bellred Road, I'm on 134th and Bellred Road, 10 blocks from here. So your three biggest projects are within walking distance of where I sit in Bellevue, not Tacoma, not Seattle, not somewhere east of the mountains. They're not there. They're in an area that is fiscally conservative. We've got good leadership here in Bellevue, and people are willing to put the money in because Microsoft, known quantity, Spring District, I think that's had Google, that's had Facebook, it's had all the big players, and that's literally a project just right over here, and it's Bellevue, so it's a safe bet. Rest of the state? No, probably not. Meanwhile, the median price of a Seattle home has reached a new high, $766. In Seattle itself, we're now above $1 million. John Manning, managing broker for Remax Gateway, said, $1 million, median home price, half below, half above. Super expensive. This isn't a place where, you get that first job and you look around and you get a $300,000 home. There are no $300,000 condos here. They're $500,000 and up for a condominium packed in like a bunch of sardines. It's crazy. It's crazy. And so much of this has to do with our ability or our inability to actually open up and build a bunch of stuff. Can't do it. It's not there. And it's because you've restricted your ability of these developers, and the banks know it as well. The banks know it as well. Hey, why are we lending money here? Let's spread our risk and go to an area that isn't doing harebrained things like rent control, like hugging trees, all these layers of environmental nonsense, and this is the policy that gets put in place. And then literally, like Jason Rantz was saying, one day they pull their head out of their ass and go, where is all of our affordable housing? Where did it go? Well, you've slowly been chipping away on constructing that over the years. And at some point in time, your rents are going to absolutely go to the moon, because you don't have enough builders building multifamily housing to the moon. And, with the rent that we have here, with the rent control that we have here, say it's 9% a year. That's 10% a year. You got $2,500 rent, $250 every single year. Next year, it's $2,750. Year after that, it's $3,000. Year after that, it's $3,250. Year after that, it's $3,500. So in a short period of time, you've gone up $1,000. And that's literally what's happening here in Bellevue, in Seattle. It's going like that. And you're talking rent, not a mortgage. A mortgage? $6,000, $7,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. So the only people making that kind of money are $20K a month, maybe dual income, maybe more than that. If you got kids, those little rugrats are expensive, right? I mean, the whole thing is it's wildly expensive. And you are seeing this consistently in the big blue cities, counties, states. This is the end result of virtue signaling to the nth degree. Hey, Let's throw in this program. Let's throw in that program. All that stuff's got to cost money. And at the same time, you're constricting the supply. And I'm just talking about housing. How about we talk about gasoline prices here in Washington State? Some of the highest in the United States. California, same thing. Policy reflects, price. It just does. There's no way you can get around it. And yet, these policymakers are like, oh, what do we do here? They're stuck. They don't have the ability to clean up homelessness. They don't have the ability to basically drive down crime because they're not willing to prosecute anybody. They're not willing to throw people in jail on a big scale. Crime numbers are down, but that's because they were at all-time high levels, 2023. You had some just skyrocketing numbers. They were just to the moon. That's going to go up and down a little bit, but the vast majority of what you're seeing isn't easily addressed with the politicians we've got in place in these big cities. So it's that endless train wreck that you're watching that really can't be solved because constituents aren't willing to vote in a different direction with somebody who's reasonable, with somebody who has their head on their shoulders, with somebody who doesn't have their head up their ass. And it's pretty simple. It's pretty basic. It's not that hard to figure out. And yet, Washington State in the last election just voted even bluer. I'm sure it'll work out sometime. Just keep voting blue. You'll get there. You'll get there. I probably won't be here, but you get there. You got to keep trying. Somebody's got to stay and do the Lord's work. That's what I told my dad today. He's like, well, how long do you think you'll stay in Washington? I'm like, probably a while. Yeah. I mean, podcasts for days, weeks, months, years, possibly millennia. Who knows? Love to have you subscribe, hit that notification bell, hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks again for joining. Bye for now.